President Trump says the U.S. is willing to provide security guarantees to Ukraine if a ceasefire is achieved in its fight against Russia. The U.S. position was relayed by European officials after a virtual meeting yesterday that included President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. It comes ahead of a much-anticipated meeting between Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. Joining me to discuss, Niall Stanage, White House columnist here at The Hill. Hey Niall, so we haven't heard from Trump himself on this issue of security guarantees, but if what the Europeans are saying is accurate, does that represent a shift in policy from the Trump administration?
It does, or at least represents a clarification in policy. And it is a very important one, because the Ukrainian fear in all of this has been partly that there could be a ceasefire agreed at some cost to Ukraine in terms of territory, and then the Russians could simply come back for more at a later date. So the Ukrainians understandably want some deterrent to that happening, and a security guarantee from the United States would absolutely be central to that whole concept.
The Europeans have offered to put troops on the ground in a peacekeeping capacity after the fighting stops. Hard to imagine, though, that Trump would want to do that. And he's reportedly not interested in considering NATO membership for Ukraine. So what security guarantees does Trump have to offer?
So there are a number of ways that it could work. There could be, for example, American equipment supplied. There could be American troops in so-called support roles, as we have seen in other conflict zones around the world. It's not out of the question, I think, that there could be some American boots on the ground if we're talking about a peacetime scenario in which there is a multinational force aimed at protecting Ukraine, or what remains of Ukraine if Putin gets some land here. So I think that's the kind of thing we're looking at. But you're quite right that President Trump has ruled out NATO membership for Ukraine.
What are your thoughts on this Trump-Putin meeting on Friday more broadly? Trump kind of freaked everyone out by saying territorial concessions by Ukraine were on the table. Zelensky wasn't invited to this meeting, but then Trump kind of downplayed the expectation, said it was just a feeling out meeting, also threatened severe consequences if Putin doesn't agree to end the war. Seems like this meeting could go any number of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen President Trump zigzag quite a lot in terms of his tone. Back at the end of February, there was that infamous White House meeting in the Oval Office where Trump and J.D. Vance basically berated Zelensky. Then there were times when Trump appeared to be putting more rhetorical pressure on Putin. That seems to have flipped again more recently. What I would say about this is that certainly the Ukrainians and other people in Europe are concerned about a one-on-one Trump-Putin meeting. I think the concern there is that Trump may agree or concede to things that are at least sympathetic to the Russian position.
Yeah, one of the concerns from the Europeans is that in this one-on-one meeting, Putin will make an offer that's maybe enticing for the U.S. but bad for Ukraine and Europe in the long run. Like what, though? What does Russia have to offer that would kind of meet those parameters?
So I think when we talk about that kind of an idea, what we're really talking about is Russia ultimately gaining a significant amount of Ukrainian territory that would be or become Russian permanently or semi-permanently. Now, the concern about that is obvious from a Ukrainian perspective. From a broader European perspective, the idea is that that would in fact embolden Putin, embolden the Kremlin to keep pushing in an expansionary fashion westwards. But for Trump, of course, he is primarily interested in a peace deal overall and a peace deal with his signature on it. So I think that's where there could be the division between American prerogatives and European ones.
There's also this issue of the secondary sanctions still kind of hanging out there. Trump promised to impose them on third countries who buy Russian energy if Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire. Is that seen as a credible threat in countries like India and China, who do buy a lot of oil and natural gas from Russia and could apply pressure if they were being hurt by sanctions?
It is a pressure point for sure. I mean, there is an issue here where the sanctions on Russia itself obviously have not hobbled the economy to the extent that Putin is suing for peace. And so these secondary sanctions could isolate Russia further. And obviously the entire purpose is to dissuade these other nations from buying Russian energy primarily. But we have seen a deadline that President Trump had threatened on this topic pass without any action. And so the question is, yes, there is a theoretical potency to these kinds of measures, but will they in fact be enacted? That's where the uncertainty lies.
All right. A lot of questions about what's going to happen at this meeting Friday. We will continue to follow, but for now, we'll leave it at that. Niall Stanage, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Drew.